Hello internet, welcome back to Most Amazing Top 5. I'm your host Jack Finch, and today we're going to be delving deep into some horror stories all the way from Vietnam. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment in the box down below. Let us know what you'd like to see more of on this channel. Now, the war that happened between North Vietnam and South Vietnam occurred between 1955 and 1975, a staggering 20 years that saw military contributions from countries such as Russia, China, the United States of America, and South Korea. An incredibly unpopular war historically that left the country of Vietnam with a fallout of horrific tales, war crimes, and even supernatural occurrences. On top of that, Vietnamese folklore is rife with creepy tales of ghouls and spirits that roam the country, some of which have a strong basis in reality. Starting us off at number 5, we have the story of the Bata Tut. The Bata Tut, or Ujit, are often referred to as the forest people, Vietnam's own incarnation of Bigfoot. The first recorded sighting was in 1970, when Dr. John McKinnon observed a number of tracks that led him to believe that a large, upright mammal lived in the wilderness. Locals confirmed the theory and described sightings of the beast as 7-foot-tall creature covered in hair, everywhere but its knees, the soles of its feet, its hands, and its face. Its hair ranged in colour from grey to brown to black. The locals reported that the Bata Tut had been sighted incredibly often, hunting alone and foraging food. Sightings of the Bata Tut were also reported while the Vietnam War was raging on. US veteran Craig Jorgensen reported sightings of a similar creature while he was deployed there. He referred to the creature as a rock ape with a reddish tinge to its fur. 2 of the creatures were also reportedly captured by tribesmen in 1971, the outcome of which has never been discovered. Whatever it is, the Bata Tut has experts on both sides of the spectrum completely perplexed. Hopping in at number 4, we have the peculiar tale of the meat-eating grandmother. Now, some Vietnamese people swear that this cautionary tale is true, and if it is, then it's absolutely terrifying. A long time ago in rural Vietnam, refrigeration was a difficult commodity to house, and keeping meat stored safely required a little bit of creativity. Because of this, to stop their steaks from going rotten, the townspeople would heavily salt their meat and store it in a kitchen in the backyard. That's how things were done, and everything was nice and peaceful. Until there is one night when a housewife noticed that all of her household's meat had gone missing from the usual place. Furious, she asked who had eaten it, but nobody would come clean. The next day, she bought more meat from the market, but when she checked again, the same thing had happened. Determined to catch the culprit, she lay in wait at a window overlooking the backyard. Everyone in the house was asleep, including the children. As midnight crept in, she saw the figure of a strange person lingering in the shadows. What she saw was an old lady, the elderly grandmother of the family next door, and she was ripping apart the meat with her teeth and eating it raw. The next day, the family were perplexed and severely creeped out by what they had seen. But that night, they'd had an important dinner planned, and so hired a babysitter to take care of the children. The evening went off without a hitch. They'd had a nice dinner and a few drinks, but when they arrived back at home, they heard a blood-curdling scream. What they found was the ravenous grandmother from next door chewing on their young child's arm. Yikes. Next up at number 3, we have ghost tape number 10. Imagine you're a Viet Cong soldier out on patrol in the Vietnamese jungle, and you start to hear eerie sounds of disembodied voices wailing out into the wilderness, but there's no one around to be seen. They're saying, "I am dead," and "Don't end up like me, go home." Creepy stuff, right? Well, these sounds were actually one of the more creative methods utilized by the United States military during the Vietnam War in an attempt to get the enemy forces to just give up. It was known as Operation Wandering Soul, and the Psychological Operations Battalion of the US Army, which sounds terrifying in itself, broadcast these insanely creepy sounds in an effort to decrease Viet Cong morale. And, well, they're pretty much fit for a horror movie. You can even listen for yourself. We'll leave a link down below. This severely hindered the Viet Cong troops, capitalizing on their strong-held Buddhist beliefs that the spirits of the dead are doomed to walk the earth in their own personal hell if their bodies are not found and buried appropriately. It is also a stark reminder of the psychological impact and mental scars that war can inflict. Coming in at number 2, we have an incredibly bizarre story of the Bird Woman of Da Nang. Told by Marine Corps Private Earl Morrison, the story begins in the summer of 1969, with Earl and 2 fellow soldiers sitting on top of a bunker near Da Nang. The 3 were on guard duty and so were tasked to keep a keen eye on both the sky and the wilderness ahead. It was a slow summer evening with not a lot happening when Earl began to notice a strange glow in the sky. As the glow got closer and closer, Earl began to make out the shape of some sort of flying humanoid creature with bat-like wings. As the creature approached Earl, he could make out the features of a woman with totally black skin and long flowing hair. The Bird Woman was completely silent, as if no part of her strange body made any noise at all. The whole encounter was reported to last a total of just 3 minutes, with all 3 of the soldiers completely dumbfounded by what they had seen. Interestingly enough, Vietnamese folklore speaks of what are commonly referred to as night flyers, winged humanoids always described as being women and are said to swoop down and brutally attack the unwary. Who knows? Finally, bringing it in at number 1, we have the ghosts of Ha Mai Village. After the war, the residents of the central Vietnamese village of Ha Mai began telling incredibly vivid stories about spirits that had begun to surface. In the words of the village's local Taoist priests, they began to share an entire existence with their invisible neighbours. And the weird thing is, different people have reported the exact same sightings, but on completely separate occasions. There was an entire series of apparitions that the villagers became familiar with. The most common was a young woman with her 2 small children who peacefully roamed the village of Ha Mai. Another common spirit was known as head down, feet up, a figure that was often spotted standing and moving on its head, with the locals believing that this was due to the unconventional condition of its burial. There was also a pair of perpetually hungry American servicemen, a heavily wounded South Korean soldier, and a young boy who would sprint into the woods. The ghosts of Ha Mai were a vivid reminder of the horrific massacres that took place there during the war, where South Korean forces conducted a brutal attack on unarmed citizens in retaliation to Viet Cong mortar fire. The victims were 135 women, children, and elders from over 30 households. In December of 2000, a memorial for the 135 victims was raised in Ha Mai village in an attempt to heal wounds and remember the ghosts of the past. That's all we've got time for today, folks. You've been watching Most Amazing Top 5. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment in the box down below. Let us know what you're thinking of these videos. I've been your host, Jack Finch, and until next time, take it easy.